So obviously we're going to answer some Week 14 fantasy football questions tonight because this is, like I've been saying all week, our final battle for fantasy football playoffs right now. But I did want to start with something. Obviously, the Trevor Lawrence injury has been on a lot of people's minds. People are outraged by the hit itself. And listen, I said it on the defense ranking video. That was not a dirty play. And I am always one to defend defense. That's for sure. I defend defense because you know what? You freaking need them for fantasy football. And I just wanted to start with it today just because of just how much has been made of it. So obviously Trevor Lawrence is going to the IR and his season's over. So certainly his fantasy football season is over. So essentially what that means for us is not only, Trevor Lawrence hasn't really been playable as a quarterback all year, so that's not really the problem. But of course this impacts, it impacts what Brian Thomas Jr. will be able to do for us in fantasy football, what Evan Ingram can do for us in fantasy football. But I just want to go through it deeper, guys. Like, the reason I said on the defense video that you can't look at this as some, dirty hit, some dirty play. Guys, this is why I always say, if you can't take the violence and if you can't take the violence in football, you're watching the wrong sport. This is a violent game. And when you go all out and suspend Azeez Al-Shaair for 3 games for hitting a quarterback who was sliding, it was an illegal hit, but a 3-game suspension is ridiculous. And then a buddy of mine sent me a TikTok today, and it was basically, saying that Azeez Al-Shaair, faces criminal charges. It's like, dude, there's no way Trevor Lawrence would do that, but if he did, could you imagine the backlash he's going to face from a football play? Dude, they're going too far with these defensive players, man. I'm telling you guys right now. I said it. Anybody remember the live stream that I did during the offseason? Obviously, it was during the offseason in, March, so not many people were watching as much as they are during the season. But I did a live stream when they changed the hip drop tackle rule. And I was like, this is bad for football and for fantasy football. And this is what you're going to see. What are defensive players supposed to do? So this whole thing has gotten out of hand. And I'll tell you this right now. I have no support for the NFL dropping a 3-game suspension on Azeez Al-Shaair. And I think that it's a non-paid suspension. So he's not getting paid. He's losing money by being suspended. I think it's disgraceful. I think people who are upset about this hit should either watch a different sport or just watch a different sport. This is football, man. I just wanted to start that out. It's really ridiculous, guys. Really drives me up the wall as a pure football fan. This is it's too much. It's too much. I have to go off of this because it's just going to make me mad. I think it's so ridiculous and it's utterly disgraceful. I just want to discuss that really quick, but obviously we're here to answer questions tonight. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. I just had to go on a little tangent right there. All right, so let's start from the top. Nathaniel Perez, what's going on, man? St. Brown go off with Jair out. Oh, it's very possible. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Packers, I expect, divisional games, you never know. Obviously, it could go lots of different ways. And if you go based on the first outcome of the first time these teams played this year, the Lions and the Packers would be in a lower scoring game. But that one was in Green Bay. Obviously, they're an outdoor, team. And I remember that day, it was slushy and it was rainy. It was nasty weather. Well, this is the problem for those outdoor games with the Packers. Sometimes you're prone to that. I personally like outdoor football, but it's obviously going to be a non-factor with the weather is in Detroit tonight because it's a dome. So I think it could absolutely become a shootout. And Jair Alexander's been in and out of the lineup all year, and that's definitely weakened the Packers defense as a whole. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very possible. I mean, you never sit St. Brown anyways, but, I mean, for a 20 to 25-point game tonight, very, very possible. Jaden Salgado, what's going on? Where are the kicker rankings? Yeah, so they did not. I did not have time to get around to them before the game, so essentially they're going to be dropping tomorrow. The fantasy playoff kicker rankings, they're out there, but the kicker rankings for this week, they will be dropped tomorrow. Joel, what's going on, man? Mike Kelly, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Full PPR, Evans, DK, Tyreek, or Akine. Well, I've been saying this. I've been saying this all week. Nick Westbrook, Akine. I'm tired of fighting it. I'm tired of fighting it because the guy is like doing things like it's unbelievable. He's getting away with like so much, dude. Like it's crazy what he's doing. It's a total outlier. The guy is basically getting no more than like three catches per game, and he's managed to get a touchdown per. He's averaging 1 touchdown per game since they came out of the bye week. It's absolutely outrageous. I don't know how it's happening. So it's hard to bench that. I have no problem with people trying to ride the lightning on it, but obviously, when you've got options like Evans, DK, and Tyreek, I'm not gonna flex Akine over those guys. I would play all of them over Nick Westbrook, Akine. That's more for like if you're debating between like Calvin Ridley. I think is even a decent debate. You know, would you play Calvin Ridley or him, or would you play Jacoby Myers or him? For me personally, I'm going to go with Mike Evans this week. The matchup versus the Raiders is awesome. Mike Evans came back last week off the, second game off the injury, and he put up a touchdown for over 100 yards. Like that's essentially what you could get, especially without Chris Godwin there, who Mike hasn't played without Chris Godwin, but 2 games now. So yeah, I think that he's a really, really safe play moving forward. And obviously has a massive ceiling. So I got to go with Mike Evans here. Appreciate the super chat, Mike. That is how you get your question answered immediately, to go through and do a super chat and get you to jump the line. Really quick, I just wanted to point out something. I saw something from Danny Alvarez. Said, are you an analyst there at all on Fantasy Pros? I'm not an analyst, and I guess I could... I guess just using this gives him a shout out. I've got no problem with that. But this is really accessible rankings right here. And I do not have my own site. I don't know. Should I create my own site and start doing these? Start having these data points right here, because that's the only reason I'm using Fantasy Pros for that. Let me know. Nate Dogg, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Appreciate the super chat. Star one: Hunt, Gus, Disley, Wicks, or Cooks. Well, I don't have a particular problem with Brandon Cooks right now, especially since they're taking on the Bengals. Like that matchup doesn't scare me obviously one bit. And also it just comes down to it also comes down to the reality of CeeDee Lamb will not be able to hit big games every single week, right? Like that's not obviously going to happen every single time. Now, I'm probably going to lean away from doing that, to be honest with you, because I think that there's better options out of the ones that you've given. Like, for me personally, I think that Wicks is a play that I would play over him. Because I just got done saying, I do think that there's a lot of potential for this game tonight to be a shootout. I mean, I'm really excited for this Thursday night game just as a football fan, but the fantasy upside could be huge. Now, it's a divisional game. They're always definitely, harder to predict, but, especially with Romeo Doubs being out, Wicks definitely has the potential, right? Like, Wicks definitely has potential with Doubs being down. Now, it's been a while. It's been a while with Dontavian Wicks, but last week without Romeo Doubs, I think Dontavian Wicks had the highest snap percentage that he's had all year. Let me vet that really quick. So Dontavian Wicks was in on 89% of the snaps. Yes, by far the most snaps he's seen all year was last week. By far. So didn't work out for fantasy necessarily, but that doesn't mean that it can't this week. Especially against a defense that's, their one weakness has been against the pass. But it's not particularly weak. But, The Packers are just so well run offensively. I don't particularly worry about matchup as much. For me, Hunt doesn't provide that upside. Gus doesn't provide that upside. And I think Disley is a fine play, especially if Ladd McConkey doesn't play. Let's see what Ladd McConkey's update is. Ladd McConkey, limited in practice on Wednesday, limited again today. So Ladd may or may not play. I would imagine he probably will play. No, I forgot about that comment I read from Harbaugh earlier in the week. That was not exactly promising. But Disley is the guy that I think is a worthy thought. But for me personally, out of this group, I think Wicks provides the most upside because of quarterback. So I'll go ahead and play Wicks. Appreciate the super chat. Rock out, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Risk Ladd or play JMO? I think I'd probably play JMO. When you've got, that's the problem, right? Is like, Ladd's the better play, for sure. Like the one, that, like last week was a great example of how much they need him, especially now since they don't have J.K. Dobbins. Like, and they've needed him all year, but he's really coming to his own and like established a really safe floor, for sure. So like, for me personally, I think that that Jameson, you've got to do it because of the fact that you've got no choice. Like, Ladd is playing on Sunday, whereas JMO is playing tonight, and you know that JMO's playing. You have no idea if Ladd's playing. And I would imagine that there's probably either significant drop-off of the next flex that you could play, or you've got no other options because there's tons of teams on bye, and you probably don't want to drop anybody. So you can't really play this game right now, right? Like you can't play this game to where you can just like risk not playing JMO tonight when Ladd is like not for sure. Because like the one thing I'll say this, I read something earlier in the week, and Harbaugh's comments like when he was asked about this, they weren't positive. Let me see if I could try to find it and show you guys. Let's read this. It's Sports Illustrated, who's a lot of fake news, but we'll get to what the actual quote was. He's working through a couple things, and the team will evaluate where he's at as the week progresses. I thought he said something else. Yeah, there was something that he said. Let me see. Maybe this has it. Asked about practicing this week. He said, "We'll see." So I guess the fact that he is practicing is a good thing. So maybe he ends up playing, but I can't risk this. You got to play JMO. Appreciate the super chat. Rate owner, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Which kicker should I play? McManus, Sanders, or ? Yeah, again, sorry about that, guys, with the kicker rankings. They will be out tomorrow. It is a very unusual week for me. Usually they're every Thursday. You guys know the drill. But today I was not able to get to them. So tomorrow they will be there. That being said, I think that McManus is not a bad play tonight. Because again, it doesn't matter. He's been kicking good in bad weather anyways, so I don't worry about him from a weather standpoint. But the fact is that this is a divisional game that has a lot on the line for both teams. Like both teams have tons on the line tonight. I like the play with him for sure. Jason Sanders, I feel like I liked him this week. I'm gonna double check what his matchup is. I forget it off the top of my head. Jason Sanders this week at home versus the Jets. Yeah, I love the matchup for Jason Sanders as well. I'd go with Jason Sanders here personally. I think Jason Sanders is a really good play because the matchup versus the Jets, it doesn't scare me, and they're at home, right? Like people were up in arms last week, but I didn't have Jason Sanders inside the top 12. Well, it was like, guys, I didn't just forget about him. Like, he played the Packers in Green Bay on Thursday night, and he was kicking a rock, and it didn't go well for the Dolphins as a team. So, Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to matchup here, which I view more favorably for Jason Sanders, and I don't think that the Jets will be able to stop them from moving the ball. It's in Miami. If it was in New York, we'd have a different situation here, but it's not. Appreciate the super chat. Hoy and Vlog, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Let's see if I can find you. Jaden Reed or Ridley? Jaden for me personally. Again, the matchup just has so much potential. Like the matchup this week for Jaden, it's not like the Lions suck as a deep. Like obviously the Lions are steamrolling teams lately. The Lions don't suck, but I will say that divisional matchups are always dicey, right? Like you can't be afraid of the Lions defense just because of what they've done. Because like when you look at last week, my dog must be hearing something. When you look at last week, right? Like Jaden Reed, or I'm sorry, the Lions defense, they gave up a bunch of points to DJ Moore and to Keenan Allen. Well, they've been pretty solid against fantasy wide receivers, especially of late. But when you get into these divisional matchups, it doesn't really matter what the defense looks like. So personally, for me, I think that Jaden, like, he had one of his best games receiving against the Detroit Lions. He had 5 catches the first time, 113 yards the first time they played. Like, this is a good receiver. Obviously, he's such a mixed bag. Like, it's hard to rely on Jaden Reed. But to me, the higher percentage throws that he gets, the goal line opportunities that he gets, and the rushing opponents that he gets in this kind of a matchup, I think he's a better play. Ridley's not a bad play. Like, they have a good matchup this week. They take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, like, I like the matchup. But the problem that he's experiencing is, Levis has been playing better, but not good enough to be, like, providing you big games for both receivers. So, like, Ridley's kind of gotten his touchdown stolen from Nick Westbrook-Akine. And I don't expect that to exactly go away right now. I'm going Jaden Reed. Appreciate the super chat. MC Studios, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Standard, Russell or Carr? Ladder, Jacoby Myers. So, in this situation this week, Russell Wilson plays the Browns. And I don't love the matchup, like, particularly. I wish if he was playing, obviously hindsight's 2020, but, like, the Bengals last week I viewed as a great match for Russ. Because the Bengals defense sucks. Now, the Browns defense, they're not like a particularly great group either, but they obviously played them really tough the first time, and I'm curious what the weather looks like up in Pittsburgh this week. Steelers, Browns, weather. Let's see. %6 chance of rain. 44 degrees. Nah, it's just a little colder. It's not even that cold for Pittsburgh, really. It's not. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be normal weather. I think the Steelers will bounce back and win this game. Derek Carr, I just don't trust him as much as I trust Russell. I think Russell is probably the better play. He gets the Giants, which is good. I kind of think it's more of a Kamara type of game, to be honest with you. I'll go with Russ over Carr very, very slightly. Carr's not a bad play, but I think Russ will have a better showing this time around versus the Browns. Ladder, Jacoby Myers. Well, the good thing is that you do have time to assess this one because the Raiders are playing at noon and the Chargers are playing Sunday night. So we should be able to get a good sense of where Ladd will be at by tomorrow. We'll get a good sense just by like what they report the injury as. Like I would imagine he'll come to the game questionable. I would imagine that tomorrow he'll have another limited day. So here's what I would say. Personally for me, Ladd's the better play. But this is obviously one of those situations where it's a Sunday night game, so you can't just like put him in there and just like not think about it again. So what I would do personally is this. You put Jacoby in your lineup, and you monitor the situation with Ladd. If we get to before noon kickoff on Sunday, and we get a good idea and an update on Ladd McConkey if he's expected to play, I would switch him out and put Ladd in over Jacoby Myers. But if there's no update, then I would just leave Jacoby Myers in. Because they're both very similar players, like standard or non-standard doesn't affect this decision. They're both the same play, pretty much. Jacoby gets a little bit more volume, but essentially neither one of them are like massive big play threats. Ladd is definitely more of a big play threat. I would go with Jacoby, though, unless we heard anything different. Appreciate the super chat. Jordan Neversoul, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Full PPR for all these questions. Watson or Moore, Tracy Jr., Amari, or Addison? Pitts or Kraft, and IDP for last. Branch or Derwin? Thanks. So Watson or DJ Moore? Yeah, I think DJ Moore, you got to ride it. Like, the beauty is, like, and it's so clear. It really is, like, extraordinarily clear. At this point, that the problem always was Shane Waldron. Like, as far as their offense goes and how they're able to run it, that has been the biggest problem that they have experienced all year is when they had freaking Shane Waldron being their coordinator. And again, I always refer back to what Jackson Smith-Njigba said during the offseason about Shane Waldron when he was going to Chicago. He literally told the players over in Chicago, he's like, good luck to y'all. Like, that's literally what his message was to Chicago Bears players when they were getting Shane Waldron. Like, that's pretty telling, man. So I think that when you look at what DJ has done post Shane Waldron, it's been way higher floor, and the ceiling is being hit more. So, like, Green Bay was the first game without Waldron. 10 fantasy points half PPR. 23, 19. And his targets over that time, 7, 7, and 16. They get the 49ers this week, who are totally beatable at this point. And again, I just think that, like, they've been looking for him so much more and designing plays for him, as they should have been all year, but Shane Waldron's an idiot. So, yeah, for me, like, Watson, it doesn't have the floor that DJ Moore does. Watson's floor is 0 points. DJ's is not at this point. DJ's floor, I would say, is around 8 to 10 points right now. And his ceiling is just as high. So I'd go DJ for sure. Tracy, Amari, or Addison. I think that Addison is I would prefer to play Addison over Amari. Because, the problem with Amari, guys, is like his target share really has not been there. Outside of the first week for Amari Cooper with Buffalo, like, his target share has not particularly been there. He had 5 targets that first game, and ever since then, 2, 3, 3. Like, now the San Francisco game, I'll give him a little bit of a pass because they crushed the 49ers. They didn't need to throw. And it was also in snowy weather. So I'm not going to, like, beat him up too much on that. The Rams are a good matchup. I just can't trust him right now with his lack of target share. Addison is, sort of in the same boat, but even right now, like, he's getting more targets than Cooper has been getting. Like, over his last 5 games, 5 targets, 8, 9, 6. Like, his target share has been there. His floor is safer, and his ceiling has definitely been higher. Now, I'm one to always think that Cooper has a high ceiling. Like, Cooper is one of those guys that can come out of nowhere for like a 30-point game. We've seen it throughout his entire career, especially since he's been with Dallas, with Cleveland, and now with Buffalo. We haven't seen the massive ceiling in Buffalo yet, but I think that's a lot of it because they haven't needed him to do that. And I don't expect that to be different. With Tracy, Tracy's had great matchups the past several weeks, and I've always come away disappointed. And I've been playing Tracy in several different leagues. So efficient, good player, but just on an offense I don't trust. And that's the ultimate problem with Tracy. I think Addison has the higher ceiling this week. And I think his floor is not as safe, I don't think, as Tracy's, but I think Tracy right now, you can't look at him and like apply that early season ceiling to what he's doing right now. Like, this team is a disaster. It's disgraceful. So yeah, to me personally, I think that Addison is a better play. Pitts or Kraft? I got to go with Kraft at this point. Like, Kraft, the good thing, at least with Tucker Kraft, is that his target share, while not high, is stable. Like, we know what we can expect from Kraft on a weekly basis. Basically anywhere from like 4 to 7 targets. That's what you can expect from him. And he's got the end zone upside, whereas with Kyle Pitts, like, his target share is all over the map, especially over the last 2 months. Like 9 targets, 5, 1, 6, 3, 2. Like, not only is he just like lacking the consistent importance of this offense, but it's also Kirk sucks right now. Like, I highlighted this early in the week on the defense rankings. When I watched him on Kirk after this weekend, like last weekend, I saw that he's actually going through a massive decline. So yeah, I think that for me personally, it's just he can't be relied upon. I'll go with Kraft, and then IDP. You know, I think Brian Branch really is the best play. Like, when it comes to Brian Branch, what he's been doing this year, he's having a Pro Bowl season, obviously. Now, when you look at somebody like Derwin James, he's streaky, but even this year, like, his ceiling hasn't been, like, too particularly great. Like, you essentially take out last week, his best game. Yeah, it was 18 points, like, in week 3, but since then, like, he's just not as consistent as he used to be making big plays. And, you know, he's 28 years old. They're against Kansas City this week. I don't particularly hate the matchup or anything like that. But Brian Branch, like, he's got the potential to get probably, 10 tackles tonight because of Green Bay and the way I would imagine they'll be pushing the ball down the field, especially late. So I think Brian Branch is probably the preferred option here. And I get it. Like, he's had a kind of a rough go of it lately. But to me, I think that in this kind of matchup, I think that with Green Bay trying to push the ball, I think Brian Branch has the potential for a big play, and I would take Brian Branch personally. Appreciate the super chat. Okay, next up we had Rock Out. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. I can also pick up McLeod or Wan'Dale Robinson. Let's go back to your original question. Ladder play JMO. Yeah, I think that's what I was saying. Like, you, at that point, your ceiling significantly shrinks, and so does your floor. Like, especially with Wan'Dale, your ceiling essentially is kind of like at risk of like being under 10 points, right? Like, that's what you're getting. Whereas if you play JMO, like, he's got a 25-point ceiling tonight, and the floor is just as safe. Same thing with McLeod. Like, McLeod, since that one game they played against Tampa, Ray McLeod has been, like, the ceiling just isn't that high. So, yeah, I just think that for me personally, like, you'd be sacrificing ceiling to a level I'm not comfortable with if you didn't play JMO tonight. And I'm not cool with that, especially in this week where you're making the final push for playoffs, or you're in the playoffs and your playoffs start this week. You're sacrificing too much ceiling. So I would just go ahead and play JMO tonight. Appreciate the super chat. Red Evil 701, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Devontae Adams or Jaden Reed? Yeah, I think that they're both good plays in their own right. With Devontae, the good thing is you're getting a safer floor. Like, over the past month, he's had one game less than 10 points in fantasy in a half PPR format because he's getting peppered with targets. Like, Aaron Rodgers, that's his safety blanket right there. Like, Devontae Adams is clearly Rodgers' safety blanket. And I just think that, you got to be honest with yourself about Devontae is that he definitely can hit a ceiling game. It's possible. But at the same time, like with Jaden, his ceiling games are higher. Like, again, we have to be intellectually honest about that. Now, his floor is, without question, lower. His floor is basically like 4 points. I mean, that's the problem. And I would say that his ceiling is higher. Like I said, I think his ceiling is 30 points this week, for sure. But considering that his floor is so unstable, I would probably end up playing Devontae Adams. Also because of the fact that they're playing the Dolphins. It's going to be great weather outside. Like Rodgers, whether you like it or not, as a Garrett Wilson manager, like this is the problem that I outlined when they first acquired Devontae Adams is I was like, guys, I think that Adams will become the focal point as far as Aaron Rodgers options. Like, I think that's going to happen. And it has. So I would personally go with Devontae Adams over Jaden Reed. Appreciate the super chat. Chubbs McGee, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. PPR need two wide receivers and a flex. Jennings, Ladd, JSN, MHJ, and Jaden Reed. I think Jennings is a great play this week, guys. Yeah, I think that Jennings is a great play. I haven't seen anything with Brock Purdy and like him not being able to play yet. Brock's gonna play. Take it easy, buddy. Brock's gonna be able to play. So that to me is like you exclude last week and Brock Purdy, or I'm sorry, Juwan Jennings is a must start with Brock Purdy. Like that, if you just exclude last week where they played essentially in a blizzard, like they shoveled up and swept off like more than 2 feet of snow before game time, and by halftime it was like the field was covered in snow again. Like that's a California team. It was never going to be good. So, you know, for me personally, I just think that I think that Jennings has to go in your lineup somewhere. So I'd play Jennings for sure. I'd play Jackson Smith and Jigba over Marvin and Ladd personally. I think JSN, the way that he's firing on all cylinders right now, like his past month of fantasy, 33.5, 16.8, 16.7, 9.9, half PPR. Like he's become not necessarily their number one target because obviously they have the DK Metcalf factor in there who's getting like basically as many or more targets. But you have a guy who's just hitting all the high percentage throws. And Geno and him are just clicking right now. So I've got to go with JSN as my other wide receiver. And then I would say my flex, I would say that with Marvin, like with Ladd right now, it's obviously hard because like I think Ladd's a pretty solid play. For me personally, I think that just them playing the Chiefs, being a divisional game, I think it's got potential to be pretty low scoring. And I get it, Ladd is essential to their offense. But since it's a Sunday night game, you don't have the luxury of deciding between Ladd McConkey and like DeAndre Hopkins, right? That's not what you're deciding. You're deciding between him and Marvin if you didn't go with Jaden tonight. And to me, Jaden's got just as unstable of a floor as Marvin, but also a higher ceiling. And I like the opportunity more for Jaden this week. So I'll go Jaden in one of the wide receiver spots, Jennings in the other, and then I play JSN in the flex. Appreciate the super chat. Nate Dogg, what's going on? I got to speed through these. Appreciate the super chat. Jameis or Love? I'm going Love this week, yeah. Jameis last week, like I said, dude, Jameis was excellent last week. Something to be said, I think that needs to be said, is that Jameis last week was playing a defense that, while they had Pat Surtain, he wasn't following around Jerry Jeudy that whole game, and their starting second corner was out. So they were going with Levi Wallace at corner, who I know very well as a Steelers fan, sucks. He sucks. So they got sliced and diced by Jameis, obviously. But to me, Jameis is not going to be as good of a play against Pittsburgh. Like, essentially what you can look at here is with Jameis Winston, if you took out that rushing touchdown that he had against the Steelers in that first game, like he had a single-digit fantasy performance. And again, it was inclement weather, but like I don't think that the Steelers defense will be as bad the second time around. I think Jameis will be in for more of a struggle game, whereas Love I see hitting the ceiling and it has a safer floor for sure. Appreciate the super chat. Like I said, I'm going to be rushing through these last several questions because we're coming up on game time. And I can't wait for this game. I'm so excited for this game. Kevin Dow, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start Will Reichard if he gets activated off IR. I'm totally fine with it. Like, this week right now, I'll tell you this. The Vikings, they're playing the Falcons. Me right now, Vikings kicker, again, without revealing all my rankings, which, by the way, kicker rankings tomorrow. So, we'll be there. Without revealing too much, a Vikings kicker's inside the top 5 for me right now. So, whoever it will be, I'm fine playing them. And for me personally, like when you get a kicker who's coming off the IR, if your injuries aren't solved by then like it's over. So I think for me, like just the history of kickers coming off the IR, you should be fine. So yeah, like to me, it comes down to whichever Vikings kicker we get, John Parker Roma or Will Reichard, I'm fine with playing either one. And not just fine, I really want to play one of them. Appreciate the super chat. Beast Mode and Bobby Bands. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. No PPR league. Jaden or Garrett? Yeah, I highlighted this on the wide receiver rankings. I think that with Garrett Wilson right now, you can't consider his floor or ceiling much higher than Jaden. Like, Garrett Wilson, the problem, last 3 games. 6 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets, but it's been muted performances. 41 yards in 2 games and 18 in the other. So he's not exactly the big play threat that he was a month ago. Right? So I don't think that you can look at it any safer. And especially without the touchdowns lately, I think Jaden, especially in a non-PPR, is a better play. Because Jaden, again, like the good thing with Jaden is like he's not exactly like your typical Garrett Wilson wide receiver where he's going to line up on the outside and cook a corner on every single route. Like that's not Jaden's game. Jaden is slot. He moves on essentially every play because of motion, and he's going to get the ball in a bunch of different ways, and he gets touchdowns. Like that's what Jaden does. So in a non-PPR format, it's already a better play. I'd go Jaden. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we're rushing through. Nate Dog, appreciate the super chat. Do I drop Dobbins so I can pick up Seattle defense and be able to keep the Lions defense? Yeah, I said this when it happened. Like the problem with JK is that JK goes on the IR the week heading into last week. So heading into week 13, he was placed on the IR. So that means it was 13, 14, 15, and 16. So essentially the only way that you'll get fantasy upside from him is if you're in the championship. And even then, like the chances that he handles a full workload, probably slim. So for me personally, I'm fine with doing it. I'm fine with dropping Dobbins and picking up Seattle's defense and playing them this week. Totally fine with doing them. Appreciate the super chat. Jordan Eversole, appreciate the super chat. Elijah Moore, not DJ Moore. My bad. Still Watson. Tillman, I think, is coming back this week, which will affect Elijah Moore. Yeah, it looks like he's going to be back. I'd play Watson tonight, yeah. I think his upside is just higher, and I think both their floors are basically just as low now that Tillman's coming back. Appreciate the super chat. Eric M, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Full PPR, JMO or Metcalf? For me, I'm going to go with Metcalf. Full PPR especially, like the one problem that DK has had lately is that he hasn't hit on the big plays. But that's not because he's losing target share. Like, he's not losing target share. 9 targets, 5 targets, 9 targets since he returned from the bye. / injury. His full PPR performances are fine. Now the question is, where does he stand on practice participation? So they both missed. He missed Thursday's practice, and that was a downgrade from Wednesday. Yeah, yeah, that's not good. I'll probably end up playing JMO then, just because of the injury factor. You can't risk that one. Appreciate the super chat. G Medina, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat, man. Good to see you. Place in order. Love, Murray, Wilson, Winston. Thanks. So for me, I'm going to go with Kyler this week as top dog because, again, upside's always high with him, and I think he'll have a better game the second time around at home versus Seattle. It's essentially a battle for the division. So I'll go with Kyler at the top. Love at clear second because of the fact that it's a divisional game. It's indoors. I think that could be a shootout. But I also hate the match versus the Lions defense. I'd play Wilson over Winston as well. Wilson's at 3 and Winston at 4, simply because of the fact that I think Russell probably has a higher floor this week than Jameis does. And I think that his ceiling is higher too. Because with Jameis, you're going to get the turnovers, but you're not going to get the yardage and the touchdowns that you did last week. That was an outlier week. Appreciate the super chat. Sorry, meant start order for this week. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'd start Kyler for sure over all of them, then Love, then Russell, and then Jameis. Appreciate the super chat. And then we'll end on this because we're heading up on game time. Castro Radar, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start flex, J-Mo, Jacoby, Tracy, Amari, Braylon, and Devonta Smith. J-Mo's going in my lineup, for sure. But you got to put J-Mo in the wide receiver spot. Because you don't want him clogging up your flex spot tonight. So for me, J-Mo is the clear guy. If you had to go with a different one, I would say Jacoby is my second. I just don't trust Tracy in his upside. And I think that Jacoby's floor is way safer and his upside is basically as high or higher than the rest of the guys. Now with Braylon, obviously he's a wild card. Brees, let's see, did he practice? Brees didn't practice last week either, so like he may end up playing this game. Matchup's not bad. I guess we'll just have to see. But for me personally, I'd go ahead and do it. I'd go ahead and play J-Mo first, and if you didn't like J-Mo and wanted to go with a safer floor, Jacoby Myers for me. Appreciate the super chat. All right, now we're going to end on Twisted Folk. Appreciate the super chat. This will be the end of questions for now because we're heading up on game time. I've got Arizona and Denver's defense rostered. Which one do you prefer better next week? Last week you asked for hot takes. My primary was Bucky scoring more fantasy points than Bijan and half PPR. It was close, but yes, it was close. It definitely was close. And you're crushing it. Like, Bucky is on fire right now. That is a man that you do not want to play against. So, next week, the Broncos, I like them a lot because they take on the Colts, and they're both coming out of a bye, so it's not like either one of them has a leg up, but like the Colts, just the way they can turn the ball over, and they're not even like a score-friendly team. I think the Broncos, as long as they get their second cornerback after the bye week, I can't see Anthony Richardson slicing them up for a good game. I love the Broncos defense. The Cardinals defense against the Patriots is a great play, though. Like, that is a tremendous play. I would say the ceiling is probably on the Broncos side. So I still prefer the Broncos as of right now. Again, things can change. But for me right now, personally, the ceiling lies with the Broncos defense, where I think the safer floor. Really, the Broncos are a safe floor play too, but the Cardinals have a safe floor / high ceiling as well. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we're going to go ahead and sign off for the night. Not for the night. We'll be on after the game tonight, so make sure to stay tuned for the post-game analysis. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out, and let's enjoy a really good Thursday night football game, guys. Peace out. I'll see you guys after the game tonight.